This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter than all of that, something structural, something that only becomes visible after it's already moved. For a long time, you were told that power announces itself, that crises arrive loudly, that if something truly dangerous were happening, you would know. That assumption is no longer safe. What's changing now doesn't come with press conferences or official explanations. It moves underneath them, out of sight, through systems designed specifically so you don't have to think about them. And once you stop thinking about them, they start making decisions for you. I want you to stay with me for this. Not because this is dramatic, but because it's easy to miss and impossible to undo once it's normalized. What looks like an isolated incident is actually a signal, and signals only matter if you know how to read what comes next. So let's slow this down, because the danger isn't what happened. It's what had to exist for it to happen at all. What actually runs this system now is not ideology. It's not leadership. It's not even conflict in the traditional sense. It's logistics without fingerprints. Power no longer needs speeches when it has routes. It doesn't need declarations when it has corridors, shipping lanes, shadow fleets, and deniable transfers that move quietly while attention stays fixed somewhere else. This is the shift most people never see. Wars are no longer only fought on maps you recognize. They're fought through infrastructure you were never meant to notice, through movements that look routine until one of them stops. And when one stops, the question isn't what broke. The question is, how much depended on it continuing unnoticed? Because when control lives inside invisible systems, accountability disappears. No one has to claim responsibility. No one has to explain consequences. Things simply happen, and you're left reacting to outcomes without ever seeing the hands that shaped them. This is why focusing on personalities misses the point. The system works precisely because it doesn't require them. What matters now is that this machinery has begun to fail in public view, briefly, just enough to be seen. And once you see it, you can't unsee where this is going. For years, this system trained you not to notice it. Before, movement meant intention. Ships went somewhere because someone said so. Supply chains were visible enough that disruption felt exceptional. Now, movement is constant, automated, normalized. Weapons, components, critical materials move the way data moves, quietly, continuously, without ceremony. That normalization is the danger, because slow change doesn't trigger alarms, it rewires expectations. What once would have demanded explanation is now written off as routine. Routes repeat. Patterns stabilize, and the extraordinary becomes background noise. This is how risk hides. When a system depends on uninterrupted motion, any pause becomes destabilizing. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just deeply consequential. And when that pause happens without explanation, the uncertainty spreads faster than the damage itself. You don't get answers, you get silence. And silence in systems like this is never empty. It's filled with assumptions, calculations, reactions made in the dark. This is the point where history usually tells us later that something had already shifted, that the warning signs were there. They just didn't look urgent at the time, but they were. There are no perfect storms in this world. There are only slow leaks in the system. That's what happened when the Iranian ship sank. It wasn't just a ship going down. It was one critical piece of a much larger machine that was supposed to stay invisible, out of view, unnoticed. And when that piece disappeared, it wasn't just a loss of equipment. It was a loss of a link in a supply chain that ties together nations, armies, and futures. The Rona wasn't just transporting weapons. It was transporting the ability to project power at a distance, to wage war without firing a shot on public soil. But now that piece is gone, and it's gone without a trace. Without a reason, and that's what makes it dangerous, because the system that could conceal that loss, that kept it out of sight, now has one fewer safeguard, one fewer knot in the fabric. This is where the system begins to unravel, even if no one understands it yet. And as that knot slips, questions start building, questions that don't have easy answers. And when you start asking those questions, the system starts to show its cracks. What's happening isn't an isolated incident, it's a reveal. What happens next is a question of mechanics, the mechanics that tie this all together. At the heart of it, there's a fundamental truth. The system doesn't rely on governments, leaders, or military strategies. It relies on trust in the invisible, in logistics, in supply chains that can't be traced back to any one person, any one country. In other words, The system operates best when it is assumed to be invisible. The Iranian ship was carrying weapons for Russia, yes. But more than that, it was moving through a shadow network that bypasses conventional military oversight. A network so insulated that even the most dramatic disruption doesn't raise the right alarms. When the ship went down, it didn't just expose a gap in supply. It exposed a vulnerability in the system itself, the very system that lets nations like Iran and Russia function in the shadows. And the fact that no one knows exactly why it happened? That's the point. It's not a mechanical failure. It's not just sabotage. It's the first ripple in a system that doesn't get noticed until it's too late. And every time one of these unknowns unfolds, the system accelerates its collapse, without anyone willing to step forward and say it's broken. When you break down a system like this, it doesn't happen in one sudden moment. It happens incrementally. And the question isn't just about this one ship. It's about what happens when the next one goes down, and the next, and the next. Because with each failure, the trust in the system erodes further. And what happens when that trust collapses? When the network that moves weapons, intelligence, critical supplies, all of it begins to crumble? At first, it's small. A missed shipment here. A delayed delivery there, an unexpected pause in the machinery. Then it accelerates. Larger disruptions begin to spiral without clear explanation and without clear accountability. And finally, the system ruptures completely, silently, without warning. The question we need to face right now is, which of these paths are we already on? Because the collapse of a supply chain, the trust in something so invisible, doesn't just affect nations. It affects everything that relies on it, the people who live under the weight of it. This is no longer just about Iran or Russia or even the US. It's bigger than that now. This isn't a regional issue. It's a global issue, one that stretches beyond borders and ideological lines. These supply chains, these secretive routes, they link us all. They move without regard for what you see on the news. They don't care about who's in power. They move through and between all of us. And when they break, the effects don't stop at national borders. They ripple across countries, economies, and global security. If you think this is just another isolated disruption, you're missing the point. This is the moment the invisible infrastructure starts to fracture. But here's the part that matters most. We don't know what comes next. We only know that the system as it stands is unstable. And that's something no one can ignore any longer. Because when the system fails, it won't be in some faraway land. It will be everywhere. And it's happening faster than we realize. 3 paths lie ahead, and none of them is simple. First, adjustment. This is the path where the system adapts, where the cracks are patched up, the machinery realigned, and the logistical network repaired. Things move once again, but with a scar. The illusion of normalcy returns for a time. But this is a fragile piece. The foundation is cracked, and no one's sure how long it will hold. Second, erosion. The system doesn't repair itself. Instead, it slowly decays, one disruption after another. The damage adds up, compounding into a crisis no one saw coming. But by the time it's fully realized, the system has already eroded beyond recovery. What was once stable becomes unpredictable, dangerous. And third, rupture. The complete collapse of everything. A chain reaction of failures, each one feeding into the next until the entire system comes apart. Not with a bang, not with a declaration, but with a quiet disappearance. When the network dissolves, what replaces it will be something unrecognizable. And who knows who will control that new reality? We're at a crossroads. The question isn't which path we'll take, and it's how much further down we'll go before we realize where we are. This is where we leave things unresolved, because right now we don't know which path we'll take. The system could adjust, erode, or rupture. We're still in the moment where any one of those outcomes is possible. But one thing is certain. What happens next won't happen quietly. And the question of who will control the future of these invisible systems is something no one can avoid. You might think you're far removed from this, but the truth is, you're not. What happens next in the shadows will touch everything. It's already too late to turn back. So I'll leave you with this. Don't think of this as an isolated issue. Think of it as a warning, because what happens in the next year, next few months, will set the course for what follows. And by the time you see it, it might already be too late to stop. Stay tuned, because this isn't over, not by a long shot. Thank you for watching. If you want to understand where this goes from here, you'll have to keep watching, because the answers aren't just out there. They're coming in here. Make sure you stay informed. The story is just beginning.